He just needs to sew it perfectly to become a top surgeon. Not long ago, a system panel suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Dr. Ling, a medical student, thought he was sick. So he was awakened by Dr. Ling, who said that he had finished stitching. Dr. Chu almost bit his tongue. Don't stitch messily because of speed. But when he checked the wound, he was stunned for a while. The surgery was perfect. He had worked in the emergency room for so many years and had met many skilled surgeons, but certainly not a small intern like him. Dr. Chu looked at Dr. Ling again and suddenly saw him shining brightly. Could he be an expert from another hospital who came to ManhWa to exchange experiences? This intern had stitched the wound perfectly while the patient was talking, but the patient didn't notice. Just now in the hospital, a big brother with tattoos all over his body suddenly appeared and said that his head had been chopped by someone. He demanded that the doctor quickly stitch his wound. Behind him was a group of fierce younger brothers. It seemed that if they didn't stitch well, this hospital would also be doomed. Dr. Chu had never seen such a situation before, but Dr. Ling was eager to try. Dr. Chu just picked up the tweezers and reluctantly dealt with the wound and was already sweating profusely. Dr. Chu came up with a small idea. If that expert came here to exchange experiences, then give him a challenge. Of course, Dr. Ling would not refuse any practice opportunity and immediately agreed. He was very touched in his heart. Dr. Chu was indeed a good person, but the tattooed brother was not happy. Changing to a punk meant something. He had been to the hospital many times, and if they didn't stitch well, they shouldn't blame him. While the big brother was talking non-stop, he suddenly noticed that Dr. Chu's face next to him didn't look good. He became more annoyed and said, "What are you looking at?" Dr. Chu pointed to Dr. Ling and stuttered, "Your wound has been stitched." He saw Dr. Ling putting away his tools gracefully, turning his head and looking at him twice, then stroking his head with his hand and saying happily, "Pretty perfect." Then he gave him a mirror to let him see for himself. The guy looked at the perfect suture line behind him and couldn't help but praise it. It's faster than being chopped and the stitches are good too, symmetrical and neat. Then he put down the mirror and looked at Dr. Ling with admiration and asked, "Can I have your name? I'll come to you if I get hurt again." Dr. Ling quickly told him to sit down as he hadn't bandaged yet. The big brother stood up and said, "With such beautiful stitches, why bother bandaging? I'll come back to you when I get hurt." Then he said to his younger brothers, "Follow me to take revenge." Then he led a group of fierce younger brothers away. Dr. Chu sighed with relief. He had stitched the wound while the patient was talking, and the patient didn't notice. He had never seen an intern who had just arrived stitch the wound perfectly like this. But the patient didn't realize it. So this big brother specifically asked Dr. Ling to stitch the wound on his arm. He blushed and said, "I want Dr. Ling to keep my dear tattoo intact." Dr. Ling was full of question marks. Where's the deer? It was clearly a unicorn. The big brother scratched his head and explained, "This used to be a deer horn, but it was stitched by a doctor and could only be tattooed into a unicorn." He saw that the wound was quite large and the flesh was also bulging out. If he didn't pay attention to the tattoo, it might change shape. The big brother was disappointed when he heard that. He really didn't want to go for tattoo removal anymore, and he had gotten used to the unicorn by now. At least the girls would like it. Dr. Ling said, "I understand." Then he started stitching again. At this time, head teacher No hurried over and suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't he an intern?" The tattooed big brother turned around and asked, "What are you babbling about? Don't you see that Dr. Ling is doing surgery?" Being yelled at by the big brother, head teacher No immediately shut up. At this time, the stitching was done. The unicorn big brother couldn't help but praise, "Dr. Ling is really famous. It doesn't look like a stitch at all, and the tattoo is still intact." But head teacher No looked at him with contempt and thought that these people were blind and still praised him like that. Moreover, he was just an intern. But when he saw the stitched wound, he was shocked and dropped his jaw. Is this painted on? Head teacher No changed his contemptuous look from before and praised him with all his words. Dr. Ling, you are so good at stitching. How did you learn this? Dr. Ling was too engrossed and didn't react for a moment. He casually said, it's a gift for newbies. Head teacher No was stunned for a while and then smiled awkwardly. Dr. Ling is so funny. We met before, I thought you were an intern. But then he realized that he had made a mistake and sighed and said, call me Dr. Ling, I'm an intern. After a busy day, Dr. Ling finally completed the new task. He received the ability to do interrupted vertical mattress sutures. This suture technique was mainly used to stitch skin incisions, usually used in urology. He returned to the clinic, where his family was eager to try his new skill. Boss Duong accidentally cut his hand while slicing noodles, and the wound was very deep. His palm seemed to be broken. Dr. Hung saw that the wound was too serious and had to be transferred to a large hospital. Dr. Ling next to him couldn't help but cough twice and thought that it was a coincidence that they met a trauma patient in the clinic, but they thought of transferring him first. This was a downhill clinic. When he wanted to put on his coat and help out, the system reminder also sounded, new task, heal Boss Duong's hand,